Thank you. My name is Tom Wilson, and thank you all for being here this morning. We're going to take a short, kind of in-depth look at Proposition HH. We're going to start with some of the basics of kind of how property tax works, how we got to this point, what went on in the legislative session as far as property taxes in this bill, and then also look at the bill, or the ballot language itself, and kind of look at kind of what it does and how it works. I'd like to introduce our speakers today. My co-host for this event is Representative Rose Pugliese. Our guest speakers are Senator Paul Lundeen and Representative Scott Bottoms. So I think we will go ahead and start with Representative Pugliese and just kind of give us the basics on property tax. You're a former county commissioner. How do property tax work? What are they for?
Great. Well, thank you, Don, and thank you all for being here on a Saturday morning. We really appreciate it because we really do have a great opportunity to push back on what happened this legislative session. We know this legislative session is one of the worst that we've seen for Coloradans all across the state, and especially in El Paso County where we represent. And this is our opportunity to unite and inform our grassroots people, our friends, our neighbors, people who are not really involved in politics, to make sure that they understand the impacts of especially Proposition HH on them, on their pocketbooks, on their families. And in a time where cost of living is increasing so much in Colorado, I talked to so many people at the doors when I was running and continue to today, who say we just can't afford to live in Colorado anymore. And Proposition HH has been put forth as this is the savior, this is what's going to make your property tax lower, and it's not. And so we want to get the truth out and information. And the great news is you don't have to trust us. I have on the bottom of these sheets, hopefully there's some more yellow sheets in the back, a property tax calculator where you can actually take a look and see how much you're going to be saving in property tax versus how much you're going to be giving up in your TABOR refunds. So you can make the decision for yourself. So I just want to make sure everybody has one of those. So Donna asked me to talk about property tax. I'm a former county commissioner and had to deal with property tax because our budget is based primarily on property taxes. So I want to kind of give a little bit of a history. The state gets $0 in property tax. I always find it amusing that the state gets to set the assessment rates, how much you get to pay in property tax, what percentage that is, when they get zero benefit from it. And this is the highest budget that Colorado has ever seen for state government, $5 billion that they have gotten in addition, in additional revenue this year. And so the state has plenty of money. They should be giving back that overage to the people. And we have seen the attack on the Taxpayer Bill of Rights throughout the years. I will say I moved to Colorado because of the Taxpayer Bill of Rights. And when I say that, people think, well, why? But I thought any state that allows you to vote on your property tax increases had to be the most free state. And that's where I wanted to live. But I've been unpleasantly surprised to see the direction our state has gone, and have tried to be a champion for the Taxpayer Bill of Rights, and especially making sure we can vote on taxes, that we get our refunds, and that we limit government. That's what I believe in and what I've stood for throughout these years. So state government gets $0, municipal government, I know we've got a mayor, former mayor, municipal governments get very little out of property tax. Our school district, thank you to our school district leaders. The school districts depend on property tax. Your local governments, like your water districts, your fire districts, your county government, relies on property tax. And what do we pay for with your property tax money? We pay for your roads, your bridges, the infrastructure that gets people to work and gets our kids to school. It pays for lots of other services that are really important to Coloradans. And so when you take that money or change the calculations, it truly does affect the amount of services that can be provided to the constituents. And the state, as we all know, is kind of far removed from the people, further removed. We try not to be further removed, that's why we do town halls every month. But the state government in general is further removed from the people, which is why the property tax revenue goes to your local governments. You can go to your county commissioner meetings, you can go to your city council meetings, and tell the people, tell your representatives how you want that money spent and where you want it spent. And that's really important. So when the state comes in and says, well, we are going to determine how much that is, which is within their right, that's what they're able to do, it doesn't affect the state. It affects the services that will be provided to all of you. And so that's why it's really important that you have a strong voice on Proposition HH. The state could have, the state legislature, and I said this when Proposition HH was going through, we could have done one very easy thing. We could have just lowered the assessment rate. We know property taxes in El Paso County have gone up 40%. I talked to somebody yesterday, 40% increase in their taxes. And we knew this was coming. I'm going to let Senator Lindeen, I don't want to steal his thunder on how we got here, but we knew this was coming since 2020. And so, and Republicans had bills. I had 3 property tax bills that were going to lower your property taxes. But we could have very easily, in a very simple bill, gotten up and said, we are going to decrease your taxes. This is how we are going to lower that assessment rate, the state assessment rate, and you would be paying less in property tax. So the one phrase, if you remember anything from today, because I know it's all very complicated, but the one phrase I want you to remember, if you remember anything from today, is the state government in general, does not need to ask your permission to decrease your property taxes. They don't, or any taxes. We could just do it. We could just decrease it and save you all money. The only time the government needs to ask your permission is to raise taxes. So why are they going to the ballot if they're decreasing your taxes? So just remember that. When you talk to your friends and neighbors, if there's one thing that they're going to remember, is we wouldn't be asking your permission if we were lowering your taxes. We can do that without asking your permission. So with that, I'm going to stop. I'm sure there'll be a lot of great information today. I'm happy to take questions later. I really do, I'm asking, in addition to these papers, which we can get more of, there's more information coming as well as the campaign launches. But ask people to do the research for themselves and look at that property tax calculator and see how much they're giving up in their taxpayer Bill of Rights refunds versus how much of an increase they're going to receive in property taxes. So thank you very much for being here, and I'm going to turn it over to Paul and Dean.
Thanks,
Is that
Rose.
right? Oh, sorry.
I'm going to step down here as a representative of the people. I think you ought to be on the same level as the people.
Some of
That's
us
just a
are shorter
metaphor.
than
So.
others.
Former Mayor Representative Wilson, Rep. Pugliese, and Rep. Bottoms, it's good to be with you. Thank you here. My task today is to put things in historical context. And so this story, the HH story that we're dealing with today, actually begins in the 1970s. You all remember the tax revolution. Ronald Reagan is swept into power in 1980 because we had stagflation. We had outrageously high tax rates. Well, that's the big frame. And the real question that we're dealing with here is, what's the history of how we got here? And what's the story that's underlying what's happening today with Proposition HH? So, the only question is, what is a tax? Anybody want to tell me what a tax is? Theoretically, it is the money that we, as a sovereign people, are willing to give up to government to do the jobs we want government to do. That's what a tax is. It's supposed to be voluntary. It's supposed to be designed by our volition to do what we ask to be done. Here in Colorado, we have Taxpayer Bill of Rights, which provides a protection, as Rep. Pugliese said. You don't need a ballot initiative to lower taxes. You only need a ballot initiative to raise taxes. That's what the Taxpayer Bill of Rights does. So in 1980, Reagan was swept into power on the back of the tax revolution, won 44 of 50 states. And then he went on in the next, his re-election, to win 49 of 50 states. And in the course of his presidency, the marginal income tax rate, now we're talking property taxes together, but it's still the same idea. It's the people's money given to government to spend on the people's behalf. The income tax rates, the marginal income tax rate went from 73%. In other words, you earned a lot of money and you earned another dollar, 73 cents of that dollar went to government when Reagan was elected. When Reagan left office, the marginal tax rate was 28%. Well, in 1982, on the back of that taxpayer revolution, another thing happened, and it happened in Colorado. It was the Gallagher Amendment. They said, the people said, don't tax me out of my home. At that point, the state set assessment rate, that Pugliese just spoke about, was 21%. Today it's just a little bit under 7%, as Gallagher has driven it down over time. The other thing Gallagher did, it created a construct that's a little bit challenging. At that point in time, 45% of the taxes collected were coming out of residential property and 55% were coming out of commercial property. And so it fixed those numbers and said, in Colorado, going forward, residential property will never pay more statewide than 44%. And what has happened over time then is, as residential properties have bloomed in valuation, have expanded in valuation, as people rushed into this beautiful state and bought more houses, residential property as a percentage has become greater. It was 45% in 1982, and as of, well, it's Rose, can you help me out on this? I'm going to say 75%. It might be closer to 80% of total valuation. Anybody have a hard number on that? 75 to 80% of all valuation today comes out of residential. So what's happened is we've worked through that. Government has said, hey, we're not getting as much money as we should be getting because of this imbalance created by the Gallagher Amendment, which locked in stone the relationship, 45% residential money, 55% commercial money. So residential rates have been held fairly consistent, and commercial rates have been going up and up and up. So there have been two big challenges, and these created the big shift that led to the repeal of the Gallagher Amendment. And the two big shifts are this. Rural communities were pinched because they don't have as much residential tax base. And so they needed more money. And small businesses were saying, ouch, our taxes are going up dramatically, much more fast than the taxes, and I'm a small business owner, the taxes at my home. And so there was this conversation that said, on behalf of the rural environment, on behalf of small business, both constituencies the Republicans believe in, we need to balance this out. Well, I will tell you, quite frankly, all along the way, and as we walk through the history of these various initiatives, I have voted to the chagrin of my rural constituency and my small business constituency. I voted against giving them a tax decrease. I said no when it was before the legislature. Shall we repeal Gallagher? I said no, don't put it on the ballot. Here's what will happen. The small voice, there were 7 of us in the Senate who stood and said no. The small voice of Blendine was, you will once again tax people out of their homes. Don't do this. But government said, we need more money. Rural environments said, hey, this is challenging for us. Small businesses said, we're getting hit by terrible taxes. Let's balance this out. So in 1982, the first of a 3-step dance in that relationship between government and people. Who does better with the money, the people or the government? Government said, hey, we need to make this shift. And so in 1982, went to the ballot box. But pause. I'm going to give you the complete history. What better to do on a cloudy Saturday afternoon than wade deeply into tax policy? So before we had, well actually that's not true. In 2019 was the next step. So Gallagher's in place. Government is saying, and all the challenges I just laid out, rural environment, government is saying we don't have enough money, small business is saying we're being pinched. So government offers up in 2019 through House Bill 19285 or 1258, if I could read it would help. So let me be clear. The legislature considers 1258, which was put on the ballot then as Proposition CC. So this in 1982, Gallagher passes. Property rates go down on our homes. People can afford their housing. Government saying we're feeling pinched. We need more of that money. 2019, government offers up through the legislature, House Bill 1258, which became Proposition CC, an offering that said, hey, we need more money for roads, and we need more money for education. That's what CC was asking for. And because it's a tax increase, we have to come to you, the people. And so CC went on the ballot in 2019. Now, it would have allowed government, state government, to keep over the course of 2 years, it was limited, 2 years only, $652 million additional. What happened to CC 2019? We all remember. Failed. 54 to 46. The people said, thank you, and no thank you. We believe government has enough money. Just be more priority focused in how you spend that more money. And that, of course, would be an argument that I made at that time in the legislature as well. Government has plenty of money, my perspective, because I'm a small government kind of person. You just got to spend it more carefully, more properly. Well, so that failed. So then what happened is the smart people who want to grow government, I'm not one of them, said we need to figure out a way to do this. And so we are in the third step of a three-step dance. It's kind of a waltz, if you will. You know, 3 steps in a waltz, there's 3 steps in this. In 2020, the first act was put down. Amendment B. You know what? Gallagher's creating a problem. And quite frankly, some Republican voices joined in on behalf of the small businesses and on behalf of our rural communities. Said, yeah, we need more money to deal with this. And so there was a conversation among the people. Amendment B was offered. It was Senate Concurrent Resolution 20001, so it was the first bill that was brought in 2020. Amendment B to do what? Repeal Gallagher. Exactly. The bulwark, the bastion that was holding people's control of their property taxes, so we didn't what? Get priced out of our homes, get taxed out of our homes. But there was a rational conversation. In fact, there was enough of a positive conversation that the people said, what happened to Amendment B? Passed. 58 to 42. 1.7 million people said yes, and 1.2 million people said no. So the first step was we're going to clean this up. Now, I voted against the referred measure in the Senate. I voted against it at the ballot box because I'm not, you know, a stop clock's right twice a day, and a blind squirrel finds an acorn every now and then. I claim both of those rules. You know, occasionally I get it right. This was one of those. Nope. I think what's going to happen in the end is people are going to once again get priced out of their homes, taxed out of their homes. So the second step in this 3-step dance came in 2021, the next year. Big government reboots again, Act 2. The bait and switch, which we're now seeing as a recurring thing. This bait and switch, government said, hey, we're going to reduce property taxes for 22 and 23. We're going to reduce the average from 29% to 26% for business rates. And on multifamily, we're going to go from 7.15 down to 6.8, so marginal reductions. And they put in the language, unless an initiative does something else to lower taxes, then this doesn't happen. Because there was a citizens' initiative floating around in 2021 where the citizens were saying, hey, we just want to lower property taxes. And so the legislators wrote into this bill, if in fact there's a citizens initiative that monkeys with this, then this doesn't happen. But otherwise, we're going to lower some rates. And we're going to lower the residential rate from 7.15 to 6.95. And that's the bait. We're going to lower your rates, but again, as Rep. Pugliese said correctly, you don't have to go to the ballot box to lower people's taxes. You only have to go if you're increasing their taxes. So what's that about? The switch is, and we're going to keep $25 million of extra money because we want to grow the amount of money that we, the state government, can keep above the taxpayer bill of rights cap. Well, that taxpayer bill of rights cap is politically challenging for me as a Republican because it doesn't let the Democrats spend like the drunken sailors that they are. It requires that we stay in place, but it's a policy blessing because it keeps more money in the hands of people. So what happened with that? The people sussed out that bait and switch. So Proposition 120 in 2021, the people said 57 to 43%. Nope. We see what you're doing. You are pretending to lower our taxes, but you're actually going to keep more of our money. No. So, in the third step, which is the 2023 conversation that we're dealing with right now, Proposition HH, Senate Bill 23303. You know, some people would say it's worth walking out of the House and protest of. Hallelujah, amen, pass the ammunition. I would say we're going to stand and fight to the last minute, and that's what we did in the Senate, but the reality is, pick your political path. It's a bad idea. So this third step in this three-step process is the big bait and switch. Let's call it the whole enchilada. It is an initiative that will, in fact, take over the next 9 years, $9.94 billion. My math, or math from the Legislative Council. I will say over 10 years, it will keep $11 billion of money that would have remained in the taxpayer's hands through the Taxpayer Bill of Right protection, and let the state government keep it or pass it down to the local governments as it chooses. And the bait and switch is obvious. It's the whole enchilada, it's the big deal. Now, when we were debating 303, and that's where we stood and fight, and quite frankly, my colleagues in the House stood and fight as long as they could, and they said that this is unfair what you're doing. We throw up our hands in protest. We will not be any longer a party to this conversation. I offered an amendment. It was Amendment L032. Quite frankly, it's a simple answer. It's an answer that said, you know what, we can actually solve this problem in a meaningful, correct way. We don't need to offer a bait and switch. And I called multiple times for a special session, which I will do again. And quite frankly, I think there's some copies of the Denver Post editorial that I had last Sunday in the Denver Post. I had an editorial that said exactly the same thing. Call for a special session, solve the problem, don't vote for HH. It would have lowered the residential rate from 6.75 to 6.2, so a small rate reduction. Now keep in mind, back prior to Gallagher, that residential assessment rate was 21%. We're down at 6 now, or a little bit, right at 7. We moved from 6.75 down to 6.2. It would move the non-residential rate from 29 down to 25.25, which is commensurate. We're doing the same thing for those small business owners that we're doing for property owners, residential property owners. And it would have provided for the perpetual portability of the homestead exemption for seniors. You know, seniors, 10 years in the same home, you get a homestead exemption, unless you move to a different home, then you don't get the exemption anymore. It would have provided for the permanent and protection of that exemption as well. And it went further, and it said, we will cap residential property tax increases and commercial increases at 5%. No more than 5% per year. That's a lot of increase. I mean, y'all have lived long enough to know that 1%, 2%, 3% is a big increase in a year-over-year family budget. 5% is a huge increase to give government more, I think, than what it needs. So, the framing of this whole conversation historically is, what's a tax? It's what the people are willing to give up out of their own pocket to government because they think in a limited number of circumstances, government can actually do something adequately well, and therefore we'll give it some money. Law enforcement. We've got the DA here, Michael Allen. Thank you for the law enforcement. That is something that government should and can do well. Please and thank you for running your office in an efficient way to make government as good as you can make government. Because generally, government isn't efficient. Generally, government isn't the right place to spend more money. So, taxes, the discussion of who should have the money, the people or the government, and the hidden conversation, the bait and switch conversation inherent in HH. Should the people have the money? Should we protect the Taxpayer Bill of Rights that prevents government from growing faster than the real economy is growing, the population is growing? Or Should we give government like a out-of-control stallion its head? Should we loosen the reins and let it run to the tune of $11 billion over 10 years? So that's the history of where we're going. I got a little bit more into the slam dunking on top of HH than I probably should have, but I can't have a forum and not say bad idea, vote no.
We're going to do questions at the end.
Questions at the end. So with that, I'm going to kick it over to Rep. Bottoms. He's going to talk a little bit more about some of the interactions that happened in the legislative session. And this is a great story. The Democrats were so clever. 1311 is a bill they offered that said, hey, we need marketing money to promote HH. and so 1311 is inherently marketing money to promote HH. So Representative Bottoms, the floor is yours.
Well, good morning still. So I'm a tourist here to a monument. I live on the east side of Springs, so it's good to be with you guys here. There's a lot of story that goes along with this that these guys have explained, the taxes have explained how we got here. But there's a big story that just was in this last session that explains what went down and how it went down. And I think this is pretty important in the big picture of this. So to start at the beginning of the session, we were already hearing, and the Republican caucus, we were already hearing that this, what is called Senate Bill 303, which is now what you're calling Prop HH. Senate Bill 303 set it up to be presented to you, and I'll explain that in a second. But we were already hearing that there was going to be a big bill that Polis was presenting to the Democrats, for the Democrats to run this, that was going to address the property tax, and we all knew that the property tax was going to be going through the roof, okay? And so Polis is going to be introducing this bill. This was at the beginning of the session we were hearing about this. So we kept waiting for this. There was 3 or 4 bills that we knew were coming, and this was one of the big ones that was going to be coming through this. Now, the reason that that's important that you know that we were hearing about it at the beginning is because it didn't get introduced to us until the very last week of session. We had less than a week. We had 3 days to deal with this massive, massive bill. Okay? That was strategic. That was important. Governor Polis did this through the Dems in a very strategic way. And just as a side note, just so you know how some things work, we sat and watched in the House where we knew there was some Democrats that did not like this bill and did not want to vote for it. And they would get called out one by one to the governor's office, and then they would come back much more interested in voting for this bill. And one of the basic things, and we do know that because two of the Democrats came and talked to some of our Republican caucus, they were basically threatened, if you don't vote for this, you will not get reelected. Governor Polis said that to them himself. Okay, now, all of this is just part of this story. We saw through our session, Representative Frizzell, she is Castle Rock area, Douglas County. She ran a bill that was designed to stop any kind of property tax increase. Actually take it back to January 21, stop it there, and then lock it in for 4 years so that it would fix this whole problem that we're talking about. And so if everybody was really concerned that our property taxes were going to be going too high, if they were really concerned that this was going to hurt our state and hurt our homeowners, then it would have been a very simple thing. Everybody just vote for her bill. And that would have just locked it in. We wouldn't have had to worry about this. We wouldn't be having the conversation. But here's a little secret that some people don't know, is that Democrats actually like taxes. They like when you raise taxes. Now they'll try to spin it and they'll try to do all this stuff, but they like it when you raise taxes. Now what happened here is this is the highest property tax increase in the history of Colorado in a year time frame. Okay, Governor Polis knew this was going to be very detrimental, not to him necessarily as a governor, but as a potential presidential candidate in the future, which is where everybody of the Democrat Party nationally is heading with Polis. They're grooming for president, and he knew this was going to be a big hit on him. In fact, the World Economic Forum has already come down and talked to Polis quite a few times about this presidential thing. And so he has to appear to be some kind of moderate or something. Once we got rid of Gallagher, now we have a problem that is affecting the state and will continue to affect the state. We should never have gotten rid of Gallagher. It was the block, the stopgap, as Senator Lundin was saying. But now without that, it's going to continue to raise. Our property taxes are going to continue to raise. And so then, in fact, I'll just throw this out here too. I also ran a bill to lower income tax. And the Democrats shot it down like crazy. And it wasn't going to affect anything. It wasn't going to affect their budget. It wasn't going to take extra money. It was an incremental change that was going to be affected as we went forward. And that was shot down. Why? Because Democrats like taxes. They like your money. Remember, the taxes are your money to begin with. And Tabor gives you some of those back, right? The other side of that is Tabor also limits how much the budget can grow, and the Democrats don't like that. And quite honestly, sometimes Republicans really want the budget to grow too. But we got to own that a little bit. You got to be a true, strong conservative that says, I'm not going to let this stuff grow. They have enough tax money. They have enough in their budget. And so all of this stuff is building throughout this. So now we're in the last week of the session. And we know the bill has been coming. We haven't seen it yet. Now they present 303, comes to the Senate, comes to us in the House. And this is, we have 3 days left. Now, if you know how a bill works, you got to go through committee, you got to come to the floor, you got to do second debates on the floor, then you got to go to thirds, and then thirds is when it gets voted on. All of this is going to be done in 3 days. We never get a bill through that quickly. It does not happen. But this one was magic. And so it finally comes to us on the floor, and we've got basically 3 days to debate this, to discuss this. Now, I'll talk about the walkout, because that actually was kind of important in this whole process. But what the Democrats have been doing to us as the Republicans in the House is when they got to a bill, anytime they got to a bill that they didn't want to debate with us or discuss with us, and they didn't like what we had to say, they would rule on seconds when you do all the discussion between Republicans and Democrats. Hours and hours. You can go as long as you want. The Republicans would rule, the Democrats would rule 14 on us, which has never been used in the history of the House, ever. In this session, it was used a dozen times or so. And it basically shuts down our debate they can come all the way down to an hour. So now, instead of debating for 15, 20 hours, which we had done, and it irritated them, they now say you can't debate at all. Well, they immediately do this on this bill. So we've got the biggest bill. This is actually the bill right here. This was introduced to us 3 days before the end of session. Now we're going to have to debate the largest bill that has come before us on the floor, and it's one of the most contentious because basically it's Polis saying, this is a simplification, but Polis is saying, look, this is bad that the optics of all of this property tax increase is on me, so I'm going to present something that looks like you're going to get some of your money back. That's all it is. It's a fake. As Senator Lundin was saying, this is a fake. This is not the real deal. You're going to get less money back. In fact, we discussed it. Representative Gabe Evans, he presented some very specific numbers, and I'm going to give you a ballpark. But basically, if you were going to get your Tabor refund, and you own a house that costs $500,000, that's the number he took. If you're going to get your Tabor refunds, you would get somewhere around $750, ballpark. If this goes into effect, they're promising you're going to get more, but you were going to get a little bit over $300 back and lose the $750, and then also lose Tabor in the process. And he sat and explained this on the floor in very penny by penny detail. So it's not about giving your money back. It was about Governor Polis just trying to have something that made him look less bad. that this was all going to be happening. So they bring it to the floor and immediately say, we're going to limit your debate time. Biggest bill, 3 days left, you can only debate for an hour. Okay? Now, me personally, I like to talk. An hour, I'm just getting, I'm just kind of getting relaxed and warmed up at an hour. I've also been a pastor for 30-something years. That's my zone, that's my comfort zone. So they immediately limit that. Well, that frustrates us because we can't talk about this stuff. We can't do that. So we start running all kinds of amendments, and that's Representative Wilson's forte. He's very good at this. So we start putting a bunch of amendments together because why? You can talk longer on each amendment. You can't talk long. You can only talk an hour on a bill, but now you can talk an hour on an amendment, right? Or each person gets a time frame. But that's how we're going to do it. So we run an amendment. We talk as long as we can on that. That kind of gets to the end of the time. We run another amendment. We kind of do all this. Well, then we find out that the Democrats are actually wanting us to stall because they've got some amendments. And and one of the Democrats was with Governor Polis trying to build some amendments that would make this look better than he was already trying to accomplish. So we're doing all of this. Then when it comes to, and they just keep shutting us down, keep shutting us down. And by the way, this is not constitutional, and these rules have never been used in this way ever. And by the way, Rule 14 was never designed to be used this way. But they don't care. They don't care about breaking the rules. The whole thing is very dishonest and corrupt, and they'll look you right in the face and just break the rules and say there's nothing you can do about it because we've got more than 2/3. And so we're fighting this, doing everything we can. We're running every angle, whatever we can do to get some more time just to be able to discuss this so that the people out here are seeing this and hearing about this, okay? So then they get through seconds. Now we're going to go to thirds on this, and they just kept delaying because they were trying to push it later in the evening. This is just kind of a Democrat strategy. If they push it after dinner, everybody starts getting concerned about eating dinner, and instead of actually fighting for a bill. And by the way, we have Republicans that are guilty of that. They'll just vote because it's later in the day and they don't want to be there. And this is the way I look at it. Once I show up at 9 o'clock, let's stay till midnight. I don't care because the Democrats want to go to dinner too. And so we get later, we get into thirds, and now they do something called Rule 16 in thirds, which they had done a few times, a handful of times in the session, and that's never been used also in the House. And so they're breaking all these rules, doing all this stuff to shut us down, and we get up to discuss on Rule 16, they shut it down, and what Rule 16 says is you have 0 time to debate. You go straight to vote, and they don't care what you have to say. And you're supposed to be allowed, each person's supposed to be allowed 10 minutes on Rule 13. But somehow, because tradition says, well, you do all your discussing in seconds, they were all mad that we were discussing, and by the way, we did this many times, that we're now discussing in thirds. And my deal is if you're shutting me down unconstitutionally in seconds, I'm going to take every second I can in 16 because your tradition means nothing to me. I don't let the Democrats define for me what I'm going to do. And so all of us in the caucus, we're standing strong together. We're going to get up there and we're going to discuss this. They shut it down. We can't do anything. We can't discuss. Because we did have some people asking us afterwards, why don't you stay in there and fight it? We were not allowed to say one word. We can't say one more word. Nothing that we can do, we can say no words. So why would we sit in there and play games with this stupid vote when they're going to vote how they want and we're just going to look like goofballs in the process, and then they laugh at us? So all of the Republicans, we said, well, we're just going to walk out. It's the last day of session. Why stay here and play all the dumb games? And then at the end you have all of this pomp and circumstance that you're ending the session like we're all these people that are getting along and playing games together. We're not. We are enemies of those people, and they are destroying our state. And we're not going to stand there and let them play games with us. And specifically after they've told us, sit down, do not say a word. So the entire Republican caucus got up, we walked out, and the media met us out there because they weren't expecting that. And so now the Democrats are sitting in there by themselves. And by the way, just as a little side note, they had a meeting after the session was shut down, And the Democrats were destroying each other in the process because the very liberal part of the Democrats are saying you gave them too many chances, you were too nice to them. I'm not making that up, okay? So here's some things that this huge bill does, okay? It says, concerning a reduction in property taxes and in connection therewith. In other words, this is supposed to be property taxes, but theoretically it's a smokescreen to supposedly be about lowering property taxes. Here's what it does. Creating a limit on annual property tax increases for certain local governments. Now this is one of the things, while we were debating the bill, that they threw in there. This was one of the amendments that was coming directly from Governor Polis and was presented, is they said we want to backfill certain districts. Okay, so you guys know how that works, right? You've got all these different districts, water districts, fire districts, all these different things. And the state is going to say, we're going to take some of this extra Tabor money and we're going to give it to some of these districts so that we look like the good guys. And so it was fire, EMT, and I think there was a third one. School districts, yeah. And they're going to backfill those. Why? Because this was what it's supposed to look like. Because we really believe in those districts. But what are they really doing? Those are very big districts. And I've talked to many firemen afterwards that, in fact, the fire department right here in Monument called me up and I had a long meeting with those guys. We talked about all this. And they're not a fire district that's going to be backfilled, but they were talking about how they're not going to get any money out of this whole thing because it's all, again, it's a smoke and mirrors. You have to have a certain amount of plateau of money before you get the backfill. Okay? And so they're not going to get any of the money, but this is where now you got firemen all over the state of Colorado that are saying, hey, you should vote on this because this is what keeps us running. Although the water districts are not backed, figure that one out. Water districts are not backed, but the firemen that use water are backed. Okay? So this is just, again, it's a smoke and mirrors trying to get people, you back the school districts, you're going to have teachers behind this because they're going to get this extra money. But really, in actuality, they're not going to get the money that it looks like in the bill that it's going to happen. It's not going to, there'll be some that will, and that's why they're shouting this from the rooftops. And we try to defeat that. Why are you just picking one district out? Why don't you pick out, well, the 3 districts? Why don't you pick out all the districts? Just backfill all the districts. Because it's not about the people getting money. It's not about the districts getting money. It's about control and money going to the state. Okay? Trying to get all of this extra money. And you're saying, well, this Prop HH doesn't send money to the state, but Tabor does. Okay? Tabor money is in the state. All right? Here's another thing. Temporarily reducing the valuation for assessment of certain residential and non-residential properties. Temporarily reducing. For how long? 1 year. And it's, again, it's a fake. It's not actually accomplishing that. Permitting the state to retain and spend revenue up to the Proposition HH cap. Anytime you ever see permitting the state spending, retaining, anytime you ever see that, permitting the state, you should always vote against it. Never permit the state. It doesn't matter. Because they're going to take more of your money, they're going to take more, they're going to take more, they're going to take more, and it's all your money to begin with. That Tabor money that is sitting there is your money. Don't let the state have it. And people say things like, well, let's use them for the roads. There's, as Senator Lundeen said, that money's already there. It's already there. Okay? Eliminating the cap on the amount of excess state revenues. Don't let the state do this with your money. Okay? So here comes to the last part. For me is, then as we're doing this Senate Bill 303, another bill gets slipped in. In the middle of this, another bill gets slipped in, and this is a House bill, and this one came straight from the governor's office too, and we know that because of who presented it. And so this bill basically says that if you want, now this is my language for it, it's a little more broad than this, but this is the simplification. If you want your Tabor tax refund this year, you will vote for Prop HH. If you do not want your tax refund, vote against Prop HH. That's what the House bill said. It was basically holding your Tabor refund hostage to make you vote for HH. That was the bill. And so we got up and said, okay, if you think that we need this money or how it's going to be, why don't we just institute it right now? Why don't we just put language in that says immediately that this is an emergency clause kind of thing, and we're going to give the money to the people immediately. Democrats wouldn't do that. No, we want to wait till after Prop HH. Why? Because it was to blackmail you to make sure that you would vote for Prop HH. Guys, this stuff is very intentional. It's not accidental, it's intentional, and it is to do away with Tabor. This is the point. The Democrats do not like Tabor. Now, one of the Democrats, he's from Boulder, he got up and we were debating, and I just got up and talked about the Tabor, and that all these different things are taking away your Tabor, and this representative from Boulder gets up and says, just so that the public knows, my district and many districts do not like Tabor. And so I followed him back up there, and I said, that's interesting, because the last time we tried to address Tabor, it was voted against by 76% of the population. 76% voted against changing Tabor at all. And I said, so apparently the only district, every single person in your district doesn't like Tabor because that's the only people voting against it. This is not a reality. Democrats and Republicans both like Tabor, and they like their tax money coming back to them, and this is a big scam that Governor Polis is doing to cover his own rear. Vote against Prop HH.
I'm not as tall as Senator Lundeen, so.
In a box, sorry, Doug.
So what is HH? We've talked about all this background stuff. We've gotten great information from where it roots from, how the state legislature went this year. That was all rough stuff, but what are we actually going to see on the ballot? So this is what we're going to see on the ballot. We're going to see, shall the state reduce property tax for homes and businesses, including expanding property tax relief for seniors and backfilling counties, water districts, all that, by using a portion of the state's surplus up to the Proposition HH cap, as Representative Bottoms mentioned. Let's start from the beginning. Shall the state reduce property tax for homes and businesses? Now, didn't you mention something about this earlier? What was that?
You don't need permission to reduce taxes.
You're a commissioner, so that's true on the state level. What about on the county level?
Same thing.
Check done.
As a former mayor here in Monument, we lowered property taxes twice while I was mayor. I'm guessing half the population didn't even know that. It wasn't anything to talk about. We just lowered property taxes when we had the money to do it. So why are they asking to lower our property taxes when they don't have to? As Representative Bottoms and Pugliese said, there was a bill just to lower property taxes, just to freeze them in a certain way. So why are they asking now? They're asking because that's not what they want.
Well, and it's a lie, too. It will not actually reduce property taxes.
So let's get to that. Reducing property taxes, what is that reduction going to be?
A reduction in the increase.
Reduction in the increase. Here is the rate reduction. 6.765, and we're going to drop it all the way to 6.7. That's quite the reduction. Here's what that looks like, and what Senator Lundeen was referring to. We're going to raise them to here, and then we're going to tell you, here's your reduction. So that's your reduction. That's what they're trying to get you to vote for. As you can tell, other years, with the years that we had Gallagher, they kept it much more even. And then there's the second part of the ballot initiative, including expanding property tax relief for seniors. So right now, if you qualify for the senior tax exemption or the homestead exemption, you get that tax break anyway. Under this Senate Bill 303, Proposition HH, everybody gets $50,000 off their assessed value. Okay, whatever. seniors get it too. So what's the expansion? Does anybody know what the expansion is? It's not the expansion, it's what you're getting anyway. But they're calling it an expansion. So there's nothing different to that. Again, don't know why that's in there. It doesn't, whether you vote on this or not, you're going to get the same deduction. And then Representative Bottoms talked a little bit about counties, water districts, fire district. And Representative Pugliese and I also met with Monument Fire District. They're running the numbers and they're seeing that they're not getting what you would expect out of this. So the good thing on the special district level and the municipal level is when you do have a good year and property values are up, you can take that, you know, it costs your citizens a little more, but you might be able to get those projects done that you don't want to add a tax for. So fire districts, a lot of fire districts are going, hey, this is going to be a great year, we'll get those projects done, and that way we never have to raise our mill levy. Well, they're doing the numbers on the backfill, and they're going, oh, it's not a great year. We're not going to see that one. And then it's also trickling down, so it's tiered. The governor made a deal with the fire chiefs that they'll be part of that top tier. So school districts will be backfilled in full. Fire districts will be backfilled in full. That was a special deal they made to add them in. And then everything trickles down. So your local municipality is towards the lower level, your water district, your sanitation district is towards the lower level. They might get what's left over. If it's a bad year for Tabor, we'll see what they get. It's the way I understand it to work. And by using a portion of the state surplus. What is the state surplus? It's the Tabor refunds. And we keep saying Tabor, it's the taxpayer bill of rights. It's our money that we get to decide where it goes. Again, you're seeing they're going to make that big decrease from 6.765 down to 6.7. And then moving forward, that decrease is just going to start disappearing. So, and that's across all families. You see the senior exemption there is the same as any other exemption there. And then we have commercial, they're a higher tax rate, which was kind of the same during Gallagher. I mean, businesses took the brunt of Gallagher. But you see they're also kind of getting a fake reduction there, or very minimal reduction. So you get, HH would give you slightly lower property taxes, exempt on the first 500,000. So when you're talking, or 50,000, when you're talking people's property taxes going up 40 to 100%, I've heard of some in cases over 100%, that 50,000 is not going to make a big difference. Seniors get the same 50,000 expansion to the senior home exemption. And like I said, that's the same for everybody. Everybody gets that exemption. Here's what it looks like on a graph. The green line you see here is where we were with Gallagher. The red line is Proposition HH. The blue line is where we would be anyway. So you see not much is changing there. Property taxes are going to continue going up. This will be the highest property tax increase that we've ever seen. And Senator Lundin mentioned it with how much more of that money is just going to the state budget. It allows them, another great thing with HH, it allows the state legislature to change it. Traditionally with Tabor, you have to go back to the people and say, hey, we want to make this change. Tabor, in those, where are those 48, 50 pages? Somewhere in there it talks about how the state quick, it's on page 72.
You've got 2 minutes, look it up.
Somewhere in there it says how from this point on, once it passes, then the state legislator can just make these decisions. So,
Which is what they want from the beginning.
Yes.
Exactly. So, huge tax increase. Allow the state to collect $12 billion in new taxes over the next decade. $460 billion over the next couple decades. Change the taper cap, in taper refunds. Except, are we allowed to call them taper refunds anymore? What were they last year?
The great Colorado gift back.
It was his idea. The bill does not do anything to, Proposition HH is for the future of more taxes at the state, it does nothing for you and your property taxes in the future. Your property taxes will go up the same way they always have, you know, and they're not going to address that at all. They're not going to say, hey, at some point it's got to stop. Not interested. So, yeah, that's what I should say. So, I want to open it up to questions now. We can talk about, I got a couple other things I wanted to mention. Where are my notes here? Oh, so what now? Representative Pugliese, say Proposition HH does not pass. What do we do?
Special session.
And so do we have ideas we're already working on as far as how to handle it?
So there were 3 bills, like I said, that was on or introduced that helped the property tax conversation. There's so many ideas on what the long-term sustainable solution is. It's not just one idea, and it's not just one bill. And so there are a lot of us who were in government before who have ideas on how this can work. So one of the bills that I had with Senator Byron Pelton, he's from the Eastern Plains, we were county commissioners together, was to set up a property tax task force. This task force would get all of the right people in the room, having discussions, not waiting till the last 3 days of session, and really vetting what would be a good plan for property tax, not in the short term, not for 1 year, or 5 years, or 10 years, but long-term and sustainable so that we can put a cap on property tax increases. And you know what you're going to pay so you can prepare for it. We don't want seniors to be kicked out of their houses. There were bills that Senator Lundeen mentioned around the portability of the senior property tax exemption so that you can sell your big house and downsize and not pay more taxes. None of those saw the light of day. Lisa Frizzell's bill that Representative Bottoms talked about never saw the light of day, never got out of committee. Our property tax task force never even got a committee hearing, which was really unfortunate. So there was no discussion. The portability bill, I don't think that was Senator Liston's bill, that never saw the light of day. So we do have some good ideas. And property tax shouldn't be a partisan issue. These are the people that we represent collectively. And as Senator Bottoms said, I just promoted you, good job. I know.
Was that even a comment?
Sorry. Representative Bottoms said, we collectively, Republicans in the House, and I don't know the Senate numbers, represent about 1 million people statewide whose voices were silenced, who were not allowed to have the conversation or engage to represent our people, and that is wrong. So we do have solutions going forward. As Senator Lundeen said, we have been asking for a special session. Regardless of whether Proposition HH passes or fails, obviously we all want it to fail. We do need to address property taxes in a long-term and sustainable way. We have not fixed the problem. And so we do have ideas that we'd like to bring forward, and we will continue to talk to all of you about those ideas and ask you to engage in maybe helping to elevate your voices through us and with us.
So one thing I wanted to bring up back to Representative Bottom's point and being on the floor and, you know, giving the Senate a hard time, is the House and the Senate, the Republican caucuses, we work together. And one thing that came up during this is the Senate telling us, hey, we're working on some ideas. Can you guys spend some time over there so we're not rushed? And we'll try to run our amendments while we're trying to figure out other amendments. We're actually working together even though we're in separate chambers. So So I just wanted to mention that because it had came up earlier. Senator Lundin, did you have something else to add as
Yeah,
far as
absolutely. Just
future moving forward?
final comments as to where we're at, and then be happy to get to questions. I know we had some questions earlier. There is a challenge. I mean, we want to properly fund our roads, right? We want to properly fund our school districts and fire and law enforcement. We want to do that. But ramming a taxpayer bill of rights killing piece of legislation through in the last several days of the session isn't a conversation to get at that problem. It is, HH is, an effort to give unbounded, expanding forever and ever more government to the state of Colorado. And so the answer is, vote no on HH, call for a special session. We can solve the problem, and it will be difficult, give and take. And quite frankly, at the end of the day, if we have that conversation, I'm pretty sure I won't be super enthused with the conclusion we come up with. But I, as a conservative, will like it a whole lot better than killing the taxpayer bill of rights, which is what Proposition HH is all about. So we should have a conversation, Republican and Democrat, conservative and progressive, about what do we want to do in Colorado. And to the question about members, in the Senate, we represent about 2.3 million Coloradans, the Republicans do, whose voices were not heard. And that is immoral. So, vote no, call for a special session, do the difficult work, get across the negotiating table, develop the policy that will properly, not excessively, properly fund the elements of government, like law enforcement, that we believe we should have.
Okay, questions? Ma'am?
Can you address the single issue bill?
Okay.
Why that failed or?
Yes. It has not failed on the Supreme Court.
Well,
Tell us what the status is.
so see, here's the way it works. A law that's passed by the legislature is deemed to be constitutional. That's just the way the law treats it. And what the court said was, well, we're not going to mess with that. It has to be in place first, and then somebody can file a lawsuit, and then we'll take action on it. So they said we will not preemptively acknowledge the unconstitutionality, even though it's pretty clear. It is not a single subject bill, and therefore there would be a battle, there would be a fight, but the court was not willing to engage. Now we'll see if the Supreme Court chooses to engage.
The Supreme
I don't
Court
think they will.
I thought it was the Supreme Court that did the same.
No.
Colorado.
Was it the Colorado Supreme Court?
Yeah,
No.
that's
Well,
it.
no. So it has already, so they're not going to engage.
They're not.
And it won't go to the US Supreme Court in time. That wouldn't happen.
But the legislature voted that any bill would be a single.
That's constitutional in nature, it's the requirement. But any bill that is passed, and this is why elections matter and majorities matter, any bill that's passed is deemed, that's a legal term, to be constitutional until proven otherwise. The court chose not to engage on this until it is actually effective. HH has to pass, then somebody files a lawsuit, then the court would say, oh wow, we got here illegally, and we've got a lawyer in the back who's going to give you all the details.
Well, not all of it.
Works by the hour, get ready.
But essentially, what Paul is saying is right, is that the Supreme Court will presume that a law is constitutional, and then some aggrieved party has to then file a lawsuit to have it elevate to the Supreme Court for them to actually rule on it. That's what Senator Lundin's talking about. So until there's an aggrieved party that files a lawsuit, they can't weigh in.
So in the state legislature, the majority has the rule. So if we go, and we did it many times, we were like, this violates that rule. And they say, I don't think so. Let's move on. And that's how it goes. So we had 2 or 3 bills that we brought that up. Hey, this does not fit what you're doing here. Well, since they're in the majority, they can just say, we think it is. So, other questions? Sir?
I'm not a reporter, but I have a couple. First off, do we have access to all of these graphics?
Is that available? I mean, I can make them available. Yes.
Yeah?
Yes. Did we have a sign-up sheet?
There should be a sign-up sheet if you want to get some more information.
There should be.
Don can just put it on
Okay.
our websites or something like that.
Yeah, well, if you want to go knocking door to door, it'd be great to leave some of this information for folks.
We'll get some of that at the end. did you have any other questions?
Yeah, there's a reference to proposition HH cap. Is that merely the state surplus?
So,
No,
yeah,
Yeah.
A 1% increase year after year after year. And you all know, J. Paul Getty, who was a very rich man, said, "I've seen the 7 wonders of the world, the 8th is compound interest." 1% a year becomes an enormous amount of money over time. And that's how you go to 12 billion, I was saying 11, but if the representative wants to say it's 12, I will say $12 billion in additional state spending over 10 years.
And then lastly, I like the idea of being able to get to a special session, but with a supermajority, why do we assume we're going to get anything much better?
Well, at least it opens up the conversation.
Right.
At least we're at the table, where right now we're not. So, and I believe personally, and I've said this earlier, that if we engage our grassroots and really push back on this, the Democrats have to take a step back, and they have to invite us to the table. And so, because the people have spoken. Right now, the people haven't spoken. But once they've spoken, it gives us leverage going into those conversations. So, but that's the best we've got right now.
Let me throw something out about what Representative Pugliese just said too. I think the Senate has a different dynamic than us in the House, but we have found in the House this session, not previously, but this session, that the Democrats, a chunk of the Democrats in the House are not concerned with what the people think. They are bringing information to these representatives, but they are so liberal, they do not care. And they're going to vote however they want. So that I do think a special session is not a bad idea, but I kind of do lean toward the fact that we're not going to get much done in that setting. But if we get anything done, it's better than what we're seeing right now.
So, and let me toss a little bit of hope in on this. The people's voice matters. It's just whether it's heard or not. Right now, the people's voice isn't broadly being heard. Representative Bottoms was right. Poles is running for president. He doesn't want the black eye of a property tax problem. If HH fails, he has a property tax problem. Property tax is going up 40, 60, 80%, 100% in some cases. That's a problem. He will be forced back to the bargaining table. And Representative Bottoms is correct. There are 6 members in the 100-member Colorado General Assembly. 65 members in the House, 35 members in the Senate. 6 members, 5 in the House, 1 in the Senate, are card-carrying members of Democrat Socialists of America. They don't care. They are running their ideological program forward, which then gets to the interaction between House and Senate. Senate, we were able to kill 11 bad bills because some of the Democrats in the Senate said, those crazies from the House, the Democrat crazies, have gone too far. And they would come along with us and kill some bills. We killed 11 really bad bills, and we fundamentally modified another 11 bad bills in the Senate by virtue of the dynamic between the two bodies. And that's where we're working together. And we meet leadership to leadership, Republicans to Republicans every week to make sure that we are trying to be as strategic as possible. All of that comes together in a way where if the people will stand and say, no, we vote no on HH, we want to protect the taxpayer bill of rights, which is what this is all about, then there is a potential for a conversation that will be a different result. It still will not be something where I show up and say, or we show up and say, hey, what we've got, isn't it wonderful, it's conservative, it's great. No, but it will be a whole lot better than what we're dealing with right now.
okay, we'll go over here, ma'am. Yep.
So I think Rose mentioned that the budget for the new year is like $5 billion, which is
More.
than it historically has ever been. Me as a little, constituent citizen in Colorado, I'm semi-retired. My income is not going up. And where are they spending all this exorbitant, crazy amount of money on
We
their
got
little
a
pet
fantastic universal pre-K program, right?
Everybody gets a free school lunch now.
Yeah.
Free school lunch.
Green energy.
Yeah, so all right. I ruined my back earlier this week. So let's use the the budget stabilization factor, the BS factor. That's what it's called, the BS factor. Amendment 23 says that education spending has to grow based on population growth. But we created in 2008, when the world economy broke, this sophistry that says we have a budget stabilization factor. We're going to deny the Constitution and wink at it and pretend we're not doing it. Okay, so why does that matter? That matters in this question because since 2008, instead of choosing to do what the Constitution requires, and that is fully fund education, the Democrats have come up with 178 new offices, departments, and agencies of state government, and spent money on that, and then at the end of the budget process say, okay, what's left over for education? And that's what's going on, is Democrat pet projects are expanding the budget, not fundamentals like roads and bridges or public education. That is the problem in Colorado today.
So we have had a lot of people, moving here from California and other states, but then Coloradans are going to move to other states because we can't afford to live here anymore, you know? I mean,
That's
I don't know if that's what we want.
That's what we're seeing. Sir in the green?
So in 2013, we had 5 gun laws passed, and people got upset and they recalled the President of the Senate and 2 other senators. And is this a situation where the general population, not a focused group like the gun people, would rise up and do recalls in many districts? And what is your view on that?
I think that this one's looked at as not particularly any individuals. You have, in fact, there were more Democrat sponsors on this bill than there are Republicans in the House. So more people sponsored it than we even have. That would be a lot of recalls and a monumental task that I wouldn't see it happening. Maybe the 2 prime sponsors, if people were understanding of what's going on. You know, I think did most of you see the Magellan survey? When people understand this topic, they're against it. But there is a lot of those people that do not understand and do not wish to seek into it. And that's where you're going to find a lot of people in around that Denver, Boulder area that are just going to assume that their representative did what they were in favor of.
Please, come on forward and get the answer.
Well, I can just do it from back here, but I'll make it quick.
You can stand up here, Terry.
So another thing they've tucked into this bill is right now the way they do Tabor refund calculations. The amount you get back somewhat depends upon the amount of taxes you pay. Shock. They're going to change how the small amount of Tabor refund you're going to get if Prop HH comes back. It will change that calculation so that it is a flat rate for everybody, regardless of how much tax you've paid. So they've thrown in a little wealth redistribution, another one of their favorites, as part of this massive lesbian bill.
So that was that
came in 1311.
That House bill that Representative Bottoms was talking about that they brought right in the middle of it. All of a sudden, there's this other bill here. And yeah, what it was to kind of appeal to non-property owners that, hey, forget about property tax, we'll give you the same tax rebate as we give everybody else, or send the same check out, size check. Last time, it's supposed to be based off income tax,
Right.
and everybody gets a portion according to that. But that 1311 said, hey, we're going to give everybody the same amount because we're all friends and we're all happy, and it doesn't matter if you pay more in property tax than this person or how it works.
For 1 year.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
You're going to a different topic.
I just wanted to say another common myth associated with that, right? So 1311 for 1 year, everybody is going to get some money back. Is that renters are going to benefit in this Proposition HH Because when all of you property tax homeowners who also have a rental property get all of this reduction in your property taxes, you are going to pass that along to the renters and they will be paying less in rent. That's what they are telling them. So we need to myth bust as well when we're out there and say that there is no benefit to renters. There's no benefit to homeowners, property tax owners, but there's no benefit to renters or seniors either.
And so a little bit of insight. This is an interesting story. So I substituted into the Senate Appropriations Committee, which was the committee of reference for HH 303 in its first day. So the first day, which was 7 days before the end of session, it came into that committee. And the Bell Policy Institute is a left-leaning think tank. I mean, they lean left. And I began drilling in on that witness about, well, this is unfair to individuals who rent. And they ultimately agreed. And they ultimately called the governor's office. And they ultimately gave us 2 days later, 1311, which is now this. So the answer is they are working to achieve their policy goals, and they're blocking us out of the process and the conversation. But it was just, that's kind of the way things tend to work in that building.
Mr. LaValle.
Hi, Tom LaValle. A little bit of a comment, and I'd like you guys to address it. You know, the amount of money you're going to pay for your school taxes are going to go up quite a bit, although the mill levy rate, at least in District 20, will go down. You'll still pay more. But all that means is the state puts in the same amount less. The districts get no more money with the current huge increase. What that means is the state is going to get a boon in extra revenue because they're not going to have to spend it. Hundreds of millions of dollars, and I don't hear a peep out of anybody saying, that should be plenty of money for you all to live on because we're having to suck this up because you're giving us less money. Can you comment on that?
Yeah, so first of all, I want to call out Tom LaValle, who serves on the D20 school board.
John Graham.
John also serves on the D20 school board.
49.
49, excuse me. Anybody from D38 in the house? I'm looking for D38, our home district. No, my perspective, the heroes of elected politics are those folks who volunteer to serve on local school boards. So thank you, gentlemen, for what you do. You're absolutely correct. And the reason, the math is correct, it's a state backfill. It's money that the state normally would pay into the local school districts. Instead, what will happen is the money will flow in through HH to the districts at the same level. Previously, it's going to increase slightly more. But the state then doesn't provide its additional funding. The reason, your question was, why is nobody talking about that? The reason is they're selling this to a certain constituency. This is how we're going to properly fund public education, which is a lie. The answer is it will grow state spending, $12 billion over the next 10 years. That's what's happening. And there is a moral certainty, there is a moral high ground claimed in this word backfill. They're assuming that the money would be presented, it would be there based on what the districts want, and therefore they're backfilling what the local districts. That's incorrect. That's a policy discussion that should be had district by district by district. And they're using this word to gain or to claim a moral high ground they don't actually have in the course of this particular policy conversation. That's super deep nuance, but that is meaningful and you need to know. So the reason they're not saying is because they're selling this to people, snake oil, in my opinion, a bait and switch, another way of describing it, and they need the freedom to use that particular sales pitch, which is it's going to fund education.
Yeah.
Mr. Graham.
John Graham, President of the 49 Board of Education. I kind of thank Tom and Senator Lundeen, Scott, Rose, Don for having this. Every time Denver has tried to raise the $1 billion for education and stuff like that, over the last 8 years I've been on the board, it has always been that they're going to take more money from our taxpayers in my district and keep it in Denver than give back to us. That's why local taxes staying local is so important, or at least giving the people the choice of that. That BS factor, before COVID, they've taken away $120 million that they should have given us. And it's probably up to $140, $150 million. We would not need any of this if they fully funded education the way they are supposed to according to the Constitution. And so they lied to us about Gallagher. Luckily I didn't vote for it, but I also didn't hear you at the time because I wasn't that involved in politics. I now listen to these guys because We weren't told that Gallagher was gonna raise, property taxes and valuations. And what the state is doing is just a, sleight of hand. We're gonna say we're gonna give you more, they're just gonna take it away. They're gonna further build government so they get that union tax base, for our government unions, and they're going to basically just pay off their donors. Do not fall for this HH stuff like we fell for Gallagher. And we should have listened to these voices, and unfortunately they were squeaky wheel. So I would suggest you do call for the special session, because that's going to get people's attention. I really do believe it. You're going to get a lot of people here, activated and saying we're not going to do this. So thank you for holding this.
I think you bring up a good point. When we're talking about property taxes going up as high as they are, and we talk about our school districts and our fire districts, in a sense, you're robbing Peter to pay Paul, because those are our teachers and stuff that are getting, our firefighters that are getting that tax hike, and at the same time, the state's going to backfill the department or the school district.
Yeah,
take away from.
Something else also that both these board members are talking about, that is part of the conversation, but we don't think about it, and this is what Gallagher changing did this, is you've also got the mill levies that can be adjusted in different, that's at the local level, they can be adjusted at the local level. Well, if you're literally robbing us of our taxpayer money to backfill this, and then the state is not still paying this money to the school districts, that's where your mill levy changes, and you're taking less money. You're bringing in less money for the local municipalities, and it's supposed to be funded by the state. And the whole thing is a lie. It is using your money that you should be getting to fill all this stuff, instead of the process that it's already been set in place with the mill levies and then your property taxes and all this stuff. It's turning these things backwards so that more money's coming out of your pocket at the local level to fund the already supposed to be funded at the state level, and the state doesn't do anything extra on this. They're stealing your money. There's no way to look at it any different.
Exactly.
Another thing with that is, and I think we fixed this, and I'll let Representative Pugliese talk to it. It used to be that on the local level, municipalities, special districts, your water district, your fire district, were very careful about lowering your mill levy, because Tabor requires that to be voted on to go back up. So it's kind of, on the local level, it's kind of dangerous, where if I lower your mill levy too low for the municipality, and then I need it to go back in a bad year, you're going to say don't raise my taxes, and then we're stuck. But didn't we get that solved this year?
We did. So my third property tax bill, which was actually an all-Republican bill that wound up actually passing. I don't know if it was like the last day of session. We were.
It's called a unicorn.
I was still kind of in shock. Senator Beasley started it in the Senate, and then it came down to Representative Frizzell and myself. And so basically what local governments have been doing, but county attorneys didn't know if they actually have the authority to do, but it's what the people wanted, is allowing local governments, so when you vote on your mill levy and it's set, local governments can lower it, but they weren't sure if temporarily, if they could then raise it back up without another vote. And so there was a lot of discussion about that. And so this would allow local governments to lower temporarily the mill levy so that you will be paying less taxes. But then if they had to raise it back up, they could to the level that you already voted on. And so that will definitely give a lot more tools to local governments to be able to lower their part of your property tax assessments.
And that really shouldn't even had to have been the conversation anyway, but this is where Gallagher messed it all up.
Well, and that, as a former mayor, that's one thing we were always cautious of. Hey, we might not need it all, but if we lower it too much, they might not approve it going back when we do this. When we have one of these local fires or something that ends up taking a lot of our funds, how are we going to get back to where we were? So I'm glad you got that through, because that's how we treated it here in Monument for years. You know, we can't get it back to where it was unless we have a row of people. Other questions? Sir?
Yeah, we all know that preparation HH hurts us all in the end, and obviously it doesn't matter how the Democrats spread it. But I will say, first of all, we said that the Republicans represent 2.3 million people, right?
In the
Senate.
In the Senate. Okay. How many people are represented by the Democrats? And if we know that, how do we get them people to understand what Proposition HH is, or Preparation HH, as I call it?
Well, over 70% of the state right now, I think it's 72% of the state has no idea what proposition is about. They're clueless, the whole state, Democrat, Republicans both.
And if I
So how do we get the word out?
So if I can interject, so we have a Tabor Coalition. They're the ones who gave out these flyers. We'll be having more information that's going to be coming out. Don and I have a box of door hangers. We didn't put them out. We're doing that through Americans for Prosperity. So when you're walking for your school board candidates, which we should all be doing in this room, when you're walking for your school board candidates, you'll also have, if you'd like, to go down to Americans for Prosperity, or if, I know a lot of candidates are holding walk sessions. I'm going to be coming to those walk sessions with door hangers. So while you're walking for your candidates, if you could also walk and put these door hangers on to start getting the word out. But Don and I ran the largest grassroots movement in Colorado's history for a ballot initiative when we tried to repeal the national popular vote back in 2020. And one thing that I thought was very effective, because our numbers were so close, were neighborhood barbecues. Talking to the people who don't show up to a town hall on a Saturday morning at 10 o'clock. Those are the people we really need to reach, and those are the people you interact with every day that we don't know. They're not on anybody's list. And some of them may not even have voted in the last few elections. But making sure we engage those people in our neighborhoods, our friends, our families, making sure that they're educated. I know I've got a cousin who lives in Colorado Springs, actually in Representative DeGraff's district, and we have these conversations at our Sunday dinner every Sunday, and she likes to go on Facebook, and she likes to talk to her neighbors, and she is not engaged in politics, but she does not want the state government to take more of her money. And so those are the people that we really need to activate, but it starts right here with us.
And we're going to try to do a couple more of these throughout the area. We might do, I think Representative Bradfield's here, we might try to do one down in her fountain area. And reach out to us, because our schedules might be full, but we might have a representative that's looking to do more, or somebody else, or a senator in another area that wants to talk about it. So feel free to reach out to us and ask for help. Ask, hey, I have this group going on. I got my Elks Club meeting. Can you stop by and talk about this briefly?
Are yard signs available?
Yeah.
Yard signs?
I don't think, is there yard signs?
I haven't seen any yard signs. It was kind of difficult to get even these one-pagers for today. So the campaign is just launching.
Are you guys with HH Sucks as well? I think that's the Independence Institute.
Yeah, that's the Tabor Coalition.
Seriously, that's the website,
Yeah.
hhsucks.com.
It's on your yellow sheets. So there's the Tabor Coalition, and then there's smaller groups like the Common Sense Institute, which is doing the property tax calculator. We all are taking a part in this, and what I personally love, having been part of grassroots movements since 2009 when I started in politics, is that this is an issue that we've seen everybody come together. This isn't like, we're doing this and you're gonna do that. Everybody is coming together. So whether you go to HH Sucks, or you go to Advance Colorado, or you go to Common Sense Institute, or Independence Institute, there's so many groups, you're gonna get the same information funneled into one place, which is amazing.
Yeah.
I guess in my group, it's going to be very big, this homestead exemption, the senior thing. So what I'm understanding is, if this fails, it doesn't affect them.
No. Your senior homestead exemption still goes through.
It goes on.
You don't get that extra $50,000 that everybody else gets.
Okay.
If it fails. But you
Okay.
still get your regular.
The regular
homestead.
one.
But that is voted on every year annually, correct?
Yes.
It is
We looked to change that, didn't we?
Yeah, so it's based on the amount of money that there is for backfill. So if there's lower backfill, then they don't fund the senior property tax exemption to the level that
So
they
then it would
should.
be lower.
Which is right now.
Right.
That's how it functions right now.
Okay, okay.
So it's in danger
I don't
of
think
being
I'm
extinct.
Yeah. But
Yeah.
seniors are not getting more property
We
tax.
tried to put a year on that, tried to put 5 years on that, they wouldn't change. Here's another thing, talking about how we're gonna make this message known. I believe this is one of the biggest things that separates Democrats from Republicans. The Republicans are very, really, truly about you, the individual. That's what makes us Republicans. The reason that I'm in this office is because an individual can start with no money, no knowledge, no nothing, and represent people, okay? The Democrats are a bloc that are told what to do by the governor. They're told what to do by all of these special interest groups. Republicans we're independent. In fact, that's one of the reasons we struggle getting together on certain things, is because we're independent-minded and we're about the individual. You have a group of people that you can contact. You can make sure that they know about this, educate people. Your few hundred people on Facebook or social media or your friends, and then everybody else sitting here that has those 300 people, and then they have their people. And pretty soon we can really make a major difference about this. I believe this is what makes the Republican Party so special and so unique, is you. I'm a you, you're a you, we're all yous. And that's what makes us unique.
One thing, and Senator Lundin has more experience with it, but I've heard a lot, this being my first session, that the executive branch spent way too much time involved with the legislative branch this year. Has it always been like that? Or, I mean, what Representative Boggs was talking about earlier with the governor's staff literally going out and pulling out somebody by the collar and saying, hey, we're going to talk about this before you cast that vote. It was obvious this year. I don't know if it's always been like that, or...
Well, yeah, a little history. They keep giving me the history stories.
So good at it.
Are either a blessing or a curse, I can't tell.
You're getting old, Paul.
The reality is Polis is much more engaged because he's a bit of a policy wonk and he cares. I compare him to Hickenlooper, who didn't even realize there was a General Assembly. He was doing whatever he was doing, flying all around the world, going to Davos, marrying off Elon Musk's nephew or whatever. Hickenlooper was completely disengaged. So Polis is far more engaged than his predecessor.
And the reason we do put some of that stuff on is myself, Bottoms, and Pugliese, this was all our first session, so you are the history buff for us.
Fair enough.
Other questions? Okay, well.
A minute wrap.
Yeah, go ahead.
So I want to keep coming back to this idea that you can make a fundamental difference, and Representative Bottoms hit it very well. And quite frankly, Representative Wilson, former Mayor Wilson, mentioned it as well. Magellan did a statewide study. They're a polling outfit. And it came back and said, when people just hear HH and they see the proposition language, they say, yeah, makes sense to me. Even though you folks have now put up with an hour, two hours worth of information that caused you to think otherwise. But that poll also found out when you actually explain to the people what's going on, they start to walk away. And so your engagement, your willingness to tell the story to your neighbors is so incredibly important. Engage in the group, as Rep. Pugliese said, that are out there. I'm not a big social media person. I was told you have to get on Instagram, so I recently got on Instagram. Senator Paul Lundin, I put up a post during the course of this meeting that has the Common Sense Institute's calculator. So you can go out and calculate, what does HH mean to me? For me personally, I'm going to get a $6,000 increase regardless, and quite frankly, over time, it'll cost me about $10,000 additional dollars if HH passes. Well, I don't like that idea. So go out, Senator Paul Lundin on Instagram, get the link, the Common Sense Institute, share that with your friends. I will tell you, I mentioned earlier, I did an op-ed in the Denver Post last Sunday. I got more mail from Democrats saying, thank you for telling the truth, I didn't realize. So if you will just reach out to people and take the scales from their eyes, we will in fact be able to defeat HH, call for a special session, actually solve the problem. So Representative Wilson, Representative Pugliese, thanks so much for convening this. Scott, it's always good to be on a platform with you.
Yep, so we all know property tax is very complicated. We spent an hour and a half and didn't even delve into a lot of how the mechanics actually work. I think we have found, Representative Wilson and I, the simpler the message, the easier it is to convince people. And as Senator Lundin just said, if people know, they're going to vote no. So when you're talking to your friends and neighbors who don't come to a town hall on a Saturday morning, I really truly think the message of the government can decrease your taxes without your permission. If they're really decreasing your taxes, why are they asking your permission? I think that that's a very easy, very simple message, along with the mypropertytaxco.com, which is that property tax calculator the Common Sense Institute has. It's on the bottom of your sheets. And then just get engaged. You all are engaged, but let's get our friends and neighbors engaged as well. So thank you all for being here. We really appreciate it.
I have nothing to add except thanks for being here. And again, you're the ones who are going to make the difference on this. You make people aware. There's only so much the four of us can do. You're the one that's going to make this happen. There was somebody back here that was wanting to ask a question before we finished.
Oh, was there?
Oh, I did. I just wanted to. I'm sorry. So basically, as we're out and about, you know, I'm holding school boards, I'm helping all that kind of stuff. As we're out and about, is it safe to say when people ask? Because I know a lot of people ask, well, why would they want to do that? Why are they doing that? You know, would it be safe for us to say basically the Democrats to get elected have promised and passed programs that they didn't have money for, that they couldn't afford, and now they know we're not going to give them the money for it, so this is a way for them to kind of trick us into getting the money? Is that safe to say?
Sure. That's part of the story.
What was
I'm a
it?
simple hometown girl, so I just want to, you know.
What is this? CPHE? CDPHE has doubled in the last year or something? Last year or two?
Hundreds of additional.
Colorado Department of Public Health and the Environment. They're
Gotta pay our family members.
I'm basically new to Colorado. The last 2 years I've been here. I read somewhere, and tell me if I'm wrong, when I first got here, that state government has increased 24% over the last year or two or something like that. Is that true?
Sounds about right.
Are you saying that like the amount of employees and things like that?
Yeah, like you mentioned the Department of Education, how they've grown, you know, like, so this is why they want the money. I mean, that's the other reason why government wants money. It's like the bureaucracy grows and grows and grows and is never really to your responses or anything like that. They don't care anymore after a while. We see that in the federal government. Look at this federal government. This is a government that is just unconstitutional, and I'm not even going to talk about what's in the White House. You don't even want to talk about that.
One of the things that Polis has been very particular about this session was trying to bring everything and a lot of the laws that were coming through, bills coming through the House, were specifically designed to take away the normal process by which these things were handled with volunteer boards and things like that, bring it under his authority, hire somebody to be over that group, and then they can hire a few people to be under them. Where these used to be boards of 20 people, 30 people that were all over the state, all volunteer, now central control. That is one of Polis's biggest things, is a very Marxist mentality of state-controlled government, where he's controlling everything and every person is being paid.
Well, that's what we have with the federal government right now. That's really the control.
He does want to be president.
We do have another group coming in after us, so I'm going to start wrapping it up.
Thank you very much.
I want to thank the Independence Institute and Ben Murray. Ben Murray's got a lot of good information on this. He actually provided us the slideshow, and we just knocked it down because he tends to geek out on this stuff. And also, we have some reps from Americans for Prosperity here. They brought some t-shirts that say I love Tabor. So check that out. If you have any questions, talk to Crystal Overstreet. Will you raise your hand?
If anybody wants to help get involved with these Talk HH, we have phone calls and doors that can be knocked, and we would love any help getting the word out. We have all of the information for you, so then we'll train and do all this stuff. So we definitely need help getting the word out.
And then we have another upcoming town hall.
So Don and I are doing a series of town halls on different topics. We're going to be doing more on Proposition HH as well. But next month on September 16th from 10 to 12, will be a parental rights town hall. And we have Deborah Flora coming as our special guest to talk about the work that she's done statewide on parental rights. And then we're going to be featuring our District 11 school board conservative candidates and trying to help get their name ID out. And then we'll have some more coming up as well.
And where is that?
Firehouse Station 14.
Firehouse.
Thank you, Christine.
Your house is your 14.
Station 14.
Yes.
Where is it?
It's actually, if you know, Academy in Lehman, where they meet.
Yeah.
Or, I'm sorry, Academy in Dublin.
And we'll get information out.
It's just east off of that intersection, and it's on the north side.
If you want to get our newsletters or information, definitely please sign up on the sign-up sheet if you're not already getting those.
No, they're coming, and that would be a question for her after we're done here. Anything else? Thank you all for coming. Thank you.